What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. League of Legends has gone through many phases, releases, and all sorts of changes over the many years that it's been out. Sometimes Riot releases items, champions, or mechanics that are just kind of crazy or maybe odd in design. Luckily, they usually react pretty quickly and respond to community feedback, and even better, sometimes Riot will realize the extreme strength or odd mechanics of something before it's released, and it will just get pulled out before the game, right before it goes live. And this is the kind of thing I wanted to take a look at today. We're taking a look at items that were just really insane but never actually made it into the game. And if you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button or let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. Now, we've made quite a few videos covering some of the alpha items from League of Legends in the past, but there's definitely a few that we never looked at, and quite a bit more that existed but didn't have that much information at the time, so I wasn't sure if I wanted to showcase them. But today we've got some new ones, and it should be noted that these items that we're covering in today's video never actually made it to a playable version of League of Legends. However, these are real items that were originally planned for release at one point or another, for the most part during the very early stages of the development for the game. These items are mainly just crazy due to the fact that the original game design was based around Dota and the design of Warcraft 3, and a lot of technical limitations were put in place because of that as well. And especially a lot of these items come from a time when summoner spells weren't fully developed and actually put in the game yet, meaning that items were kind of a lot different to make up for that fact. Eventually though, Riot took advantage of their unique summoner spell system as a way to differentiate themselves from Dota, and fully designed and implemented into the game, and as a result a lot of items got cancelled. A lot of these pre-alpha items were actually just reworked into summoner spells instead. So to kick off our list, we have the parasitic Recurve Bow. So the effects for this item were retrieved, but there is sadly no image attached to it. With that being said, the Recurve Bow had a passive of 5% mana leech, 40% attack speed, and 10% lifesteal. Now this is pretty crazy considering the fact that mana leech included on an item with lifesteal is actually a really insane combination. You have to remember, this is a time when mana leech existed back in the game on characters such as Ryze and Kassadin. They would have abilities that would allow them to auto attack enemies and steal mana from their opponent and regain a similar amount of mana themselves. And it looks like there were also items that allowed you to do that too. But being able to buy this item and leech mana as well as health from a distance of an opponent is a really powerful combination. It's something that definitely could be pretty insane and a strong counter option to characters that are mana reliant. And as we saw, effects with mana leech were generally just toned down or removed from the game entirely. Next on our list, we have the item called Mana Battery, a pretty interesting name with some interesting stats. It would give the player a total of 300 health and 25 ability power. Now that's all fine and well until the unique passive comes in. So the passive is actually pretty crazy. It gives you a 20% chance on an auto attack for your next spell cast to gain plus 100 ability power. Now this is actually just insanely overpowered, especially during like the mid-early game phase. If you were like rushing this item on like a mage with a really high auto attack range. Now imagine a LeBlanc using her auto attacks to build up this passive for her next ability, and a 20% chance on attack means that you're just getting this 100 ability power like really frequently, and you can even just get it from attacking minions or CSing in general. It could make your wave clear as well really insane. You auto attack minions until you get the proc, and then you just wave clear them all instantly. It's safe to assume Riot realized this was pretty crazy during testing, and in a result, the item was removed from the game before it became playable. Next on our list, we have the Healing Totem. Now the effect that this item was supposed to have was never fully announced, but with that being said, I mean, with the name of the item, the image, it's safe to say that a Healing Totem item is something that you would probably just place on the ground, similar to like, I don't know, a healing totem, and it would cause like an area of effect heal that would affect you and most likely your surrounding allies as well. This is most likely based off of the Healing Ward item in Warcraft 3. The Healing Ward in that game just heals nearby friendly units, so it's safe to assume that the design choice inspiration definitely came from that. And based on that, it's probably safe to assume that Riot generally just didn't like the idea of an area of effect consumable heal in the form of a placeable item. Something like that that consistently heals and especially can have a really high value in something like team fights could be really crazy to balance and could definitely be pretty overpowered, depending on how strong of a heal it would actually emit, or like what the range on it is, or if it can be destroyed by opponents, stuff like that. It's possible that this is one of those items that didn't make it into the game due to technical limitations, but I wouldn't be surprised if Riot just decided they didn't want this item in the game in general. Now next on our list we have a particularly interesting item, and it was known as Infernos Justice. Now this item also has an image attached to it, and we don't know the official stats for what it did. However, its image actually almost identically resembles that of Dota's item, which is Bariza du Canyon. And there was another item that was also found within League of Legends that was similar, called the Wrathfire Crossbow. And based on the names and their similarities to the item from Dota, it's actually very safe to say that the Wrathfire Crossbow was just going to be something you build into the Infernos Justice. Now the item in Dota was actually renamed to Daedalus, and if we take a look at the stats of the item in Dota, it gave 80 attack damage and would give a pretty significant amount of critical strike damage, as well as bonus critical damage. So it was kind of like a beefed up version of Infinity Edge. So Riot likely just removed this item because they felt that Infinity Edge was a more reasonable choice instead. And there wasn't really much to differentiate the Wrathfire Crossbow and Inferno's Justice from the design of Infinity Edge in general. Anyway, moving back to items with Riot's official stats, we have the Soul Crystal. This crystal would grant the player 300 health and 30 ability power with, of course, a pretty overpowered passive like just about all the items on this list. And now this passive would grant both yourself as well as nearby allies 20 ability power and 200 health. Now, while the numbers aren't necessarily super crazy or ridiculous by any means, the idea of a consistent damage aura increase, as well as especially a health aura increase for all allies, is just something that would be kind of annoying to play against, and definitely is a throwback to the super overpowered days of Runic Bulwark, and a health aura is something that would be kind of confusing with the tech, especially because you could like go in range with someone with the aura, you would gain 200 health, and it would kind of act as like a heal almost in some ways. So the tech design for that probably would have been a little bit tricky, and I mean, just imagine all 5 champions getting 200 extra health from just like your support building an item. It would give your entire team essentially 1,000 more HP, and these aura items are typically known for being like extremely powerful but just kind of boring in a way that you don't really notice. So I have to say Riot probably just didn't like the design choice for this passive and just ended up scrapping it before it ever saw the light of day. Next we have a particularly interesting item, or really it's a set of items as I should call it, and it was an item known as Phage and Zeal. And it just is exactly what you would expect pretty much. It showed both the Phage and Zeal crossed over one another in the shape of an X. It's kind of interesting that essentially the original Zeal and Phage items that we know today were originally intended to be put together combined into one item, where you weren't actually able to purchase Zeal or Phage individually. It was kind of similar to how Zhonya's Hourglass and Rabadon's Deathcap were originally put into one item called Zhonya's Ring. It's pretty nice that Riot decided to separate the items though, because a lot of the times it doesn't entirely make sense to build them together, and it allowed them to create much more interesting upgrades from Phage and Zeal individually. Now for our next item, we have the Pendant of Zephyrus. This small red looking crystal is actually the only item on our list today that actually made it into a playable version of the game. The item would give off an ability aura which would grant nearby allies 25 armor and 30 magic resistance. At the time, it was also used as a part of the recipe to build into the Aegis of the Legion, which would of course also have that armor and magic resistance aura. The item was added in the May of 2009 patch, which was during the alpha phase, and it's easy to assume that this item didn't cost much gold because it was just simply used to be built into a bigger item. However, that would actually make it extremely overpowered because it would give you a high amount of crazy resistances for seriously cheap gold that would allow you to just buff up your entire team. And for something like that being a part of a recipe and probably pretty cheap to build, it would just be so insane and provide such a ridiculous amount of value, like most of these aura items seem to do. Regardless of the reasoning for why it was removed, it got removed in June of 2009, which was another alpha phase patch, so there isn't really gameplay footage of it, but it did actually make it into the game. Now next up on our list we have the Skull Crusher item. Pretty crazy name coming from Riot here. Now while this item specifically had no stats retrieved, we do have an image associated with it, and we can see a club style weapon roped around a stick with spikes sticking out of the side. Now I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's probably based off of the Dota item called the Cranium Basher. You know, the names are really similar, they kind of mean the same thing, and the style in art for the icons is also really similar, with the spikes just being moved from the rock to the handle in Dota's version. If this were the case and the stats resembled anything of what they are in Dota, then this item would have been pretty insane. The Cranium Basher had this insane passive in which each auto attack would have a 25% chance if you were melee, and I think 15% chance if you were ranged, to stun the enemy for 1.4 seconds. Now this passive also had a 2-second cooldown, which is actually crazy because it means every 2 seconds you had another chance to proc it again, and could, if you got really lucky, hypothetically stun someone for like 10 seconds or something. However, it's definitely possible that the item would have had a different effect, but I definitely think it would have been something most likely to do with crowd control, and it's possible that this item was just reworked into Frozen Mallet instead. Anyway, that's just about going to wrap up our discussion and today's video on some of these items that never made it into the game. Personally, I thought these were really cool and especially interesting, and it shows a lot about maybe the design of the early days of League of Legends. So if you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, subscribe for more, hit that notification bell, you know what it is, press all the buttons. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.